the founder needs to know why they're bringing in a CEO, and the CEO needs to know that they can work with the founder and share the vision. I'm Russell Gould, the CEO and co-founder of Vesta.
And David Topless, founder of Vesta.
Perfect. So tell me a bit about the company. What do you do?
The original idea for Vesta was one that I came up with, realizing that there was no dedicated estate agent or platform for selling buy-to-let property, and witnessing some friends that had gone through the most horrendous issues selling their buy-to-let. As they bought the house from the local estate agent, they naturally went back there, kicked out the tenant, tarted it up, and discovered that they'd made a number of mistakes, and it was actually quite expensive, and a loss of income was pretty horrible. To end up giving an empty house, which didn't particularly feel good, to sell to the ordinary open market through the high street estate agent. Only to find that it was then bought by another investor, because it's an ideal buy-to-let, who ripped out the new kitchen that he'd put in and put back the fire door to the kitchen and all the rest of the stuff. With the end result was that nobody was in the house for a good year, and no income had been incurred, and the seller had lost a lot of money, still having to pay insurance and keep the thing empty and all the usual stuff. Did a refurbishment that wasn't appropriate for the end user, and equally the new buyer had got a lot of loss of income. So there was massive waste, and we simply decided there must be a better way, thought about it, came up with a few extra rinks and dinks, which are perhaps for the future, but that was where we are. And my personal background, being in property and finance, an innovator in various ways that come up with new business ideas, which Vesta is a good one.
Perfect. And tell me a bit about those early days then. So when you realized that there was this issue and you had a solution for it, obviously this is very much a two-way marketplace where you really need to build up capacity on both sides. So talk to me about the very early days and how you build those both up so they actually service each other.
It's actually really tricky to launch a platform, because you're quite right. You need to have people that are bringing their stuff to sell, and you need people that want to buy. And to get it off the ground from nobody having heard anything about it and it not existing, to getting to that stage of critical mass is really tough. And it requires a lot of investment. Mill is fortunate in having some money itself to be able to do the very early stage thing. This sort of business is not one that you can bootstrap, because you just absolutely run out of money. And we were also fortunate in being able to put some early property onto the platform ourselves, from joint venture investment that we had in fact prepared 3 years previous by putting together a residential investment portfolio with Bovis and the government, to promote PRS. And part of that pitch back in 2012 was to create a portfolio that could be used to seed either a fund or other innovative solutions, such as a platform. So the seeds were way back, and it took quite a lot of time. We bought 200 houses from Bovis, and we had those as the first major seller that was prepared to trust a site that didn't exist and had no track record at all, with being the principal and only venue through which we were prepared to sell. And most sellers, frankly, would not do that. But it was because it had been pre-set up.
It's probably worth just explaining the Mill and the Vesta relationship, just because I think we might have skipped over that. So Mill was effectively the parent group, I suppose the best way to explain it, which innovates in startups. David created the Vesta concept and then used Mill and Mill's family office that sits behind it to basically incubate Vesta and to get it to a certain point in time. So it was probably just pre-launch. And at that point, the board and David invited me in and asked me if I'd come in and help take it on from there.
Yeah.
And the other thing, just to explain what Vesta is, it's a marketplace for buying and selling residential investment property. We do act as the agent for the seller because from a regulatory perspective, we need to do that. And we've been described a lot of different ways, but I'd say we're somewhere between a Rightmove or a Zoopla and a Purple Bricks, but purely for the investment property market. The explanation I like the best is we're effectively the Amazon for residential investment property.
That's nice. That's nice.
The simplest way to put it. So I'm really interested in this, Russell, with when you came into the business. So many people within our community, many of the founders have considered bringing in an external CEO to take over for a number of reasons. One, the founder might want to stay closer to their craft, or they feel like the company's outgrown them in a way, or there's 100 different reasons. So what was that like for you coming into the business and taking over?
It's always tricky when you join and a founder has their own views on where things should go and what should happen. But I think fortunately in the position we were in here, I think David had always planned to bring in a CEO from the outset. He was the kind of the brainchild behind the idea, and he seeded it and got it to a certain point. And I think I want to say this in the nicest possible way. David has brilliant ideas and lots of them, and I'm good at execution. And so he had got it to a certain point where he had built a number of different mini businesses which were going to be Vesta, and then brought me in to effectively create an operational structure to deliver a viable business and then grow from there and possibly turn it into the vision that he had. And I think the important thing is the founder needs to know why they're bringing in a CEO, and the CEO needs to know that they can work with the founder and share the vision. And if they don't share the vision, they have that debate, very early on before, the CEO steps in and starts running it. And we had a lot of discussions. We agreed on a lot of things. We disagreed on a lot of things. And we debated and we argued and we compromised, and the board helped govern parts of it. But on the whole, I think the end result was we ended up with something that was much, much stronger and much, much more customer centric when we did go live and when we did grow it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. So David, tell me about this process then. So it sounds like you had the idea to bring a CEO in from the start. Yeah. For those that are thinking about it, what do they need to get in place before they do so, and how do they find the right person for the role?
Founding a business is very, very personal and emotional. And I'm sure there isn't a founder of a business that doesn't see this as a precious little baby that he's created. And of course, it's entirely him. And what you basically need to do is to accept that you're going to pass over a really early little, almost premature baby, right? And it's premature in the sense that Vesta hadn't even started trading, right? And you've got to find somebody who's got the empathy as well as the skills and the ability to come into a startup situation as co-founder, but accept that a lot of stuff has already been done. And accept it for what it is. It was the best attempt at the time. We spent quite a bit of money, not necessarily in hindsight completely wisely and all the rest of it. And some of the bits of pain that I went through when Russell chucked out things that we'd spent money on and ideas and said, no, we can't do that now. It's too fucking complicated. We've just got to go straight. In a sense, were painful, but then equally, that's what his job was. And I know myself, as Russell has said, I'm an ideas factory. And, I can see if we do this, then we could do that one. And there's another group of people that would like to go, do it, I don't know, whether it's abroad, do it fractionally, do it in blocks of property, do it in nursing home accommodation or HMOs. There's lots of extra things you can do, right? And so 1,000 ideas all written up, you know, and then I think to myself, well, actually, that's my job done. I've got the vision, I've written it down, get on with it. Because this is me. I don't like running businesses. I really don't. And I'm not very good at it. And, you know, I much prefer thinking about something and working out how you might do it, understanding there's regulatory or investment issues, or how do you bring two parties together? What's the marketing side of it? And as well as the property side of it. How can we improve this bear of a conveyancing process that we have in England? You know, the Scottish one is better, but how can we make it really work, right? And so I came up with some ideas on that, and those are part of the basic get the platform ready. And that's a good example of what Russell said. Yeah, I can see what you're doing, but it requires a lot of upfront work, and people ain't happy with that. And the funding requirement and knock on is significant. So let's just forget it.
If I turn that into a specific example, it might just help explain it. So David, as well as creating the marketplace, David wanted to solve the conveyancing process at the same time. So he built in a process and a structure that allowed us to undertake full valuations on every property before we listed it. We completed all the searches on every property, listed it. We've put together a full business plan and had all the documentation so that at that point in time, if a buyer stepped in, they could almost transact there and then with everything they needed on hand. The difficulty was when the first group of buyers started coming in, their conveyancers turned around and said, we can't use your searches because we have insurance on our searches and we have to do them ourselves, otherwise our insurance doesn't cover it. So we're going to be doing it anyway. And then the finance company stepped in and said, well, we can't use your valuation because we use these guys. We need to do the valuation anyway. And so what happened is we were spending a lot of time and a lot of process and a lot of money preparing all this documentation, which then wasn't being used. Mm-hmm. So those are one of the things that very early on, we stripped that out and focused on the business case, you know, the things we could control and we could manage and that they couldn't get elsewhere. And in hindsight, it would have been great to have had all the money that we'd used for those processes on other things, but you only learn once you go live. And I do believe that problem that David tried to solve for is still a problem in the whole property market today and needs to be solved for and will be. And hopefully it makes our marketplace much stronger when it is solved, maybe not by us.
Yeah, or it might be my next startup. Who knows?
Absolutely. And over the past sort of 4 or 5 years, it looks like you've had incredible growth around the UK by the looks of things. So tell me about how that's affected your roles today. We've touched on the sort of transition, but what do your roles look like today compared to the earlier days?
One other thing that Russell has touched on, but has been also important in the transitioning, is for me as founder not to be seen as the chairman going forward, right? Or to have a sort of boss relationship with Russell, which is not what I seek. We're founder and co-founder, I'm very happy with that. And he's looking after and growing my baby. That's fantastic. I'm doing a good job at it. So, but I brought in and created a board, which is way over the top for a new startup. And has got serious, experienced directors on it, led by actually a quite phenomenal guy called Bob Wigley, who's very experienced in small businesses, but he used to run a thing called Merrill Lynch, which is quite a big and pretty well prestigious business, Merrill Lynch UK and Merrill Lynch Europe, and he was one of the top 3-5 people in the entire Merrill Lynch worldwide organization in the crash and all the rest of it and leading up to it. He's also now the chairman of Finance UK, so the trade body for all of the investment financial industry is got a trade body like all businesses, but this is a particularly large and important one. And you can imagine that little things like Brexit and what happens to the city and all the rest of it is absolutely focused around the trade body representing the members, every bank, every building society, everybody involved in the world of finance, talking to government and putting their case across. And the chairman in that sort of situation, you might imagine, is massively important and pretty overworked. But Bob has also found time to chair Vesta and a couple of other small startups because he enjoys the balance, and he's a polymath. He's an extraordinary guy.
So it sounds like the transition isn't actually just between the two of you. It's actually a company-wide, going from a founder-led to a true leadership-led organization.
Absolutely.
So what are the real goals then for the business over the next couple of years?
So I think we're still a startup. We still see ourselves as a startup, and we're still evolving all the time. I think we've got to a position now where our client base on the both the vendor and the buyer side is not only a first-time landlord or somebody who owns a single property, but we're dealing with big investment companies now, institutional style investments. We've got over, I think, at last count, around 350 million pounds worth of stock on the platform right now. And I think our game plan is to significantly grow that over the next 24 months. We'd like to get to more than £1 billion of stock on the platform and continue to grow our customer base across the high net worth, the institution, and the individual. At some point, we'd also like to complement the marketplace service that we offer with a managed product, a lettings product, a finance product, an insurance product, and significantly more data around each of the listings that we have to help investors decide where they're going to invest and when they're going to sell. So there isn't anything like what we do in the market today, and what I've just described doesn't exist. So we are the best place to deliver against that kind of vision. And that's the game plan. I think we've not spent any money on marketing for the last 18 months, and we're literally doubling every 6 to 12 months. So it kind of gives you an indication of where we can go in due course.
And you mentioned that rapid growth, which is obviously an exciting time for everyone in the business, but also comes with its growing pains as well. So what are the key challenges internally when it comes to growing at such a rate?
I think the unusual times that we're in have been really hard. Being in lockdown for almost a year has been difficult with team morale and keeping people motivated. But we've hired really, really good people who know what they're doing. We've brought in a few juniors who we've trained up. And I think that's the key to it, is keeping your team motivated, keeping them believing in the dream of where we want to go. Having the support of the board and the original founder has been very, very helpful.
Sure. And indeed the other family office that is in the shareholder group has been significant.
Yeah, so we have two family offices that effectively supported us over the last 12 months, which have been quite tough, even though we're growing. As a marketplace, we only effectively make money when properties complete, and the whole property process is completely slowed down massively, which has obviously had a big impact on timing of revenue coming in. So it's been great to have the family offices behind us supporting us. It's hiring the right people and keeping everybody focused on the vision. And I think we're quite a small team. It's also about doing the things that you are good at right and that make a difference, and not spending time focused on things that aren't going to add value for kind of the mission that we're on at the moment.
Yeah. And people, definitely number one. Systems, processes, IT, they're absolutely number two. And funding for the whole thing, of course, has to be found. But the IT side of the development has also gone through quite a lot of change and investment. It's another example of some early expenditure which was probably misplaced, and we didn't know enough about how the business was going to be working, and built our IT systems too early. But then when you do a platform, you have to have IT systems, of course. So you've got no choice. Platforms are tough to launch. There's a barrier to entry.
Yeah. So we when I joined, we had one platform, and subsequently brought in a couple of tech guys and a product person who I'd worked with before. And over the next kind of 6 to 9 months, as we fully understood where we were going as a business and what the focus was going to be, we completely rebuilt the entire platform from scratch, so that it is fit for purpose for where we're going. And the good thing about that now is it's very low maintenance, and we can add stuff to it almost on the fly as and when we need to.
Well, it certainly sounds like an exciting time for the business with this rapid growth. So for those listening, where can they go to find out more about you?
Vestaproperty.com, or just search for investment property on Google, and we should be coming up.